hello out there. Got an interesting one for you guys today. Man, you guys are gonna enjoy this. It's 30 minutes. Get you some tea, some coffee, get your blunt if you want, get your little drink, whatever you want to do, but just sit down. I always bring you guys some new stuff, some good stuff, and I like to keep you guys stimulated mentally. So I'm gonna get on out the way and I'm going to let you guys enjoy.
Many reasons that made Atlantis fall. There was a comet that changed the weather. So when that happened, for many of the colonies of Atlantis, it was like maybe the universe is telling us that we have to change, that this is the end of an era, and we have to begin a new one.
I'd like to welcome back to the show returning champion, Mateus De Stefano. How you doing, Mateus?
Hi, good.
Brain
Thank
food
you
for you.
for making the space.
Of course. Now, I know that we have a limited amount of time with you today because you're a very, very busy man. So let's jump right into it. Today, we're going to talk about one of your favorite subjects and mine as well, ancient civilizations and Atlantis and Lemuria and all these other places. How do you believe that ancient civilizations play a part in our understanding of spirituality today?
Well, ancient civilizations had a lot of time to analyze reality. Instead of trying to say, how can I handle this reality, they question, how can I become that reality? And the ancient civilizations, for example, we all tend to believe that it all started because aliens came to the planet and taught us how to build pyramids.
The Anunnaki.
Yeah, the Anunnaki. But that's taking the actual power of the human power in this planet. So why humans were the ones chosen by some aliens to create those civilizations? And the reason is because we humans had something that most of the other animals and realities in this planet don't have, which is imagination. And imagination allowed us to get the power of other realities and become those other realities and create those other realities out of nowhere. For example, the first humans, when they wanted to defend themselves, they learned how to imitate the animals. So they started to make the noises and the shapes of the animals, and they started to dress and use the bones like those animals. So that would scare the predators. Okay, so the imagination on how to imitate nature amplified our understanding of reality. So I think it's very important to, before talking about how the ancient civilizations were created with all this power, we have to understand that the reason why we got there is because we developed our imagination. We got out from the idea of just being humans, and we started to think, what if I become a tiger? What if I become a bat? What if I become a tree? So what would happen if I start to build like a tree? What would happen if I start to build my house like this bird? So humans started to, through imagination, take the information from everywhere. And curiosity and imagination allowed us to access the data of this world like any other ever did before. And that's why we started to tune with other beings that also used imagination to bring information from one side to the other. And are those beings that knows the laws of the universe, from which the first law of the universe is mentalism, which is everything is an idea, everything is imagination. If you know how to handle the first law of the universe, you open every door of all realities in all dimensions. So when we started to dream being awakened, and we started to imagine and create from that imagination, from those dreams, we tune ourselves in the same level of frequency of those beings in other planets that were doing the same. And that allowed the other beings to say, hey, this is the way in which we contact the imagination of the divine. And these are the pathways that we used. So maybe you can use them too. And because we were so open to imagination, we never doubted.
There's one simple vision hack anyone can use to improve vision,
Sorry,
so you
guys,
can
got a
say
little
goodbye to your
commercial. You
optometrist
might-
for
I'm
good.
gonna
Did
have
you
a
know that
couple
vision
commercials
impairments
on
have
this
nothing to do with your eyes? The eyes are simply a camera
this
for the part
is
of
a
the
really
brain
good
responsible for your
video,
sight.
and you know how YouTube does.
That
So
could be
just
possible.
bear with the commercials. I'm gonna skip through.
So that's why we moved stones just with our thoughts. That's why in the ancient times, just by singing, we could cure someone, because we were using the mind as the main tool for the infinite. So I think that's an important thing to understand, because the most darkest time in history of humanity was the time when humans were forbidden from imagining.
Mm-hmm.
When we had only one religion, and God said, this is the only truth, and there's no other truth but this one. And if you see back in history, the moment where everything was very slow and very difficult to transform and evolve, dark was that time in which we couldn't imagine, or otherwise we were wizards or witches or whatever, because we were out of that truth. So as we started again to open our imagination, we started to have technology, internet, connections, art, and all those things that we have today. So people that allow themselves to imagine, they open other realities. So ancient civilizations did that, actually. And they accessed the main codes of creation, of the universe, of how to communicate with other worlds, on how to download information from the entire reality through that.
So it seems that in ancient civilizations, they mastered different technologies than we have mastered. In other words, they weren't running around with cell phones and the internet. They were at a different playing field and communicating in a different way. They, yes. Because you start hearing stories about Atlantis, which we'll talk about in a minute, about their high-end technologies and things like that. And everyone's like, well, where are the buildings, or where are all this technology? Because they only look at it from the point of view of today's technology, not looking at it from the point of view of that tech. We can't comprehend that the pyramids in Egypt and the obelisks around the world could be connected to some sort of energy grid. That's beyond our imagination, because we can't really grasp that idea. And that's one theory, and you can tell me if it's true or not from your perspective. But they didn't have cell phones. They didn't have internet. They didn't have PlayStation 5. They didn't have that kind of technology, but they were mastering the technology that they had at a whole other level. That's how they were able to create things like Göbekli Tepe at that time, or the massive underground dwellings in Turkey that house 60,000 people, and we can go deep into all that stuff later. But is that a fair statement?
The main difference we have today from that time regarding technology is that today we think we are humans and we use technology to do things. In that time, they were the technology. That's the main difference. They weren't using others' technology or outer technology to do stuff. They were the technology.
Okay, so if I may explain, if I understand what you're saying. In other words, they were using the mind and understanding abilities to connect to universal technologies like, let's say, intergalactic conversations, or moving large rocks with their minds, or carving out cities out of a mountain, which there's so many in India and so on. They were doing these kind of things very much like the Enlightenment. They were the light. They were the technology.
Exactly.
Is that kind of what we're talking about?
It's the same thing. It's like, for example, in order to understand what a pyramid is, you have to become the pyramid first. You have to understand the logics of why to build a pyramid. Why would you create a pyramid? And what's helpful for you, for others. And the way you build it is by understanding it from within. So you have to become it, not only learn the techniques to do it. So that's why for the ancient times, spirituality was so important. Because, for example, the architect was not an architect. The architect needed to know biology, medicine, music, art, spirituality, meditation, geometry. So eventually, a person that was actually building a pyramid was not an architect, was a musician, was an artist, was a mathematician, a physicist, mathematician, a physician. It became everything in order to do that. It became the planet itself in order to be that. It became the stars itself. So you cannot build something like this without understanding how gravity works. So you need to be the planet. You need to walk the world. You need to understand the measurements of reality. So today you have a university that teach you how to build buildings.
Mm-hmm.
So you are 5 years studying to become an architect. But that architect is not an engineer. And the guy that is an engineer is not a genie. The word engineer is genie. So in order to become a genie, what do you have to have? Spirituality. Without spirituality, you cannot connect with yourself. Without connecting with yourself, you cannot open your mind. How can you open new realities if you don't open your mind? So in order to understand that mind, you have to understand physics, but you have to understand your brain. You have to understand biology. You have to understand. So eventually you need to understand so many things that are interconnected, because reality is vibration. So if you don't know music, you cannot build a building. So there are so many concepts that if you don't become all of them, if you don't feel the music, if you don't feel the stars, if you don't feel the plants, if you don't feel the emotions, so you cannot create a pyramid. And that's the main thing. It was not about aliens coming and giving us the technology to build a pyramid. We all became a pyramid. That's why we could build it.
We understood it at a much deeper level than just looking at it from the outside. So that's why when you look at a Frank Lloyd Wright building, who is a very famous architect here, it's an art piece. They literally are, his homes are art pieces because he looked at it completely, almost like it defied physics. So when I was in Chichen Itza, when you sit there, you've been to Chichen Itza, correct? When you clap and you hear the sound echo and you hear the bird chirp, that's crazy. Do you imagine trying to do that today from the point of view of an architect trying to build a stone pyramid that does that today? Would be nearly impossible because the level of understanding has to be so grand, which is what you've been saying. You have to understand all this kind of stuff, where back then it was a lot easier for them to understand it. No cell phones, but they could do this.
Exactly. Yeah. The whole thing was in that time was about how to use your technology, which is yourself. So first you have to learn how you work before you actually can make the world work.
Oh. Put that on a t-shirt. Put that on a t-shirt, sir.
That's deep. That's deep. That's deep.
That's such a great quote. You need to learn how to work yourself before you can help the world. It's such a beautiful, deep quote.
Yes. So basically, that's why ancient civilizations are so interesting. And every time that someone tries to understand how they could possibly know that the measurement of this side of the pyramid is going to the actual North Pole, well, you are thinking it as an engineer today, but actually you can ask any bird on a tree where the North Pole is. It's like you just have to pay attention where they are flying to. So in that time they just tried to imagine how they would fly, and they were filling the North Pole, and they would just calculating the image of that through how the birds fly. So they started to imitate the patterns of the flight of the birds in order to calculate exact measurements. So there are so many things in nature that you can only feel and perceive when you become it, that in order to access that, you have to open your abilities. That's why when people start to wonder how ancient civilizations did it, they all end up into spirituality. Right. Because it's the only way to understand it. It's the only way to understand what it was.
So is that why quantum physics is starting to get closer and closer to the spiritual texts of the East, of the Vedic texts and these ideas? And that's why the physics world is just like quantum physics. It's spooky. Like Einstein said, it's spooky physics, because they just don't, it's not grounded in this perspective. It's grounded in this other perspective that we're talking about, becoming the atoms, becoming understanding. Because, what's the term entanglement, quantum entanglement. That doesn't make any sense with physics. I think you can't explain it in physics. But you can explain it kind of in quantum physics. But in spirituality, it's completely explainable. Right?
Yeah.
But let me ask you about this real quick. Going to Central America and in South America, did the Aztecs, the Incas, and the Maya come across these pyramids, these structures? Did the cultures come up, or did they actually create those structures? Did they just find these? Because to me, it never made sense. The Aztecs were sacrificing and cutting people's heads off and throwing them over these pyramids. I'm like, you mean to tell me the people who created this insane, beautiful, construction that we can barely comprehend how they did it, were sacrificing and cutting people's hearts out. There's a disconnect there for me. What do you know about that?
Well, the White House was built by slaves.
Well, yeah, I mean,
So-
they were.
So, of course, in that time, the idea of killing people and doing sacrifices was very common. So for us today, it's like crazy.
Mhm.
But for that time, it was like an honor also to be sacrificed for the gods. So
Of course.
it was a totally different concept, of course, culturally talking. But but not all the pyramids were built by Mayans, Incas, and Aztecs. They just came and rebuilt them, like the Egyptians. We tend to say the Egyptians built the pyramid. No, the Egyptians didn't exist when the pyramids were built. It was different cultures, and then people from Nubia came to Egypt, and then people from Arabia came to Egypt, and people from Greece came to Egypt, and they created the Egyptians. But it wasn't actually all the time Egyptians who built the pyramids, for example. But they rebuilt them. They recreated the idea because today, since Napoleon, 1700s, they we didn't have this thing about discovering an ancient place and taking care of it like
Right.
an ancient place.
Right.
Before Napoleon, if you find something that was old, you rebuild it and reuse it.
Right.
So nobody took care about the ancient world, about like, oh, this is historical. So in every step of the history, whenever there was a fallen stone, they would rebuild it. They will paint it again or make an inscription or something. So it's very difficult to actually say this was built by these people, because no, this was rebuilt by these people. So throughout time, many of the pyramids and the constructions were rebuilt. Like the pyramids in Chichen Itza, I think, they found out now that there are like 3 pyramids more inside.
Right.
And they're so ancient that doesn't match with the Mayans. So
They built on top, and then like on top of, there's many generations of it. But then also like in Egypt, it seems like the pyramids got worse with time, where they should have gotten better with time. But that kind of shows that it wasn't the same technology or the same information or knowledge that built the first pyramids, that built the step pyramids, let's say.
well,
Sign up for this
Sorry,
workshop
guys, got
now,
another
and we'll
commercial
teach you
here. I'm
how
just
money works
fast-forwarding right
and also
on
how to
through
manage
it.
money.
Hope you
best
guys
thing I
are
like about
enjoying
it
this.
well, basically the thing was that the Mayans and the Aztecs, they had polytheism. They were taking care of the ancestors,
Mhm.
and they took care of the temples as a way to connect with the divine. So they rebuilt it and took care of it. What happened in Egypt was that the Islam and the Christianism, first the Christianism and then the Islam, they thought that those things were built for gods that were not true,
Obviously.
and that the gods of Christianism and the god of Islam were not supposed to build temples for the gods.
Uh-huh.
So they started to use the pyramids, the stones from the pyramids, to build houses or use them for other things. So it was a completely different tradition that kept the story. That's why they didn't take care of the buildings in Middle East, but they did in America.
So let me go back because one of the big things that you talk a lot about is your past lives in Atlantis, and it's one of my favorite subjects. Maybe I lived there. I don't know. At one point in one of my lives,
For sure, we all.
I'm sure we all did. If we're here, we probably were in Atlantis at one point or another.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, from your remembering, because you have a remembering of Atlantis, what led to the downfall of this great society? Was it political? Was it internal? Was it external, like a comet or the Earth shifting, or what was it that you remember?
There were many facts, many reasons that made Atlantis fall. If we want to take a look into the bigger picture, there was a comet. There was not a comet, but a rock, an asteroid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that changed the weather. So when that happened, for many of the colonies of Atlantis, it was like maybe the universe is telling us that we have to change, that this is the end of an era, and we have to begin a new one. Atlantis said, no, if we do that, we will lose the connectivity, we will lose the whole thing. So Atlantis started to try to control the colonies that were asking for independence in order to start a new system. A lot of people from Atlantis started to move away from the capital and the main islands. So they left the islands. That created an economical conflict. Basically, Atlantis got in a crisis, like a normal country, and they started to invade other countries to get the resources back or the control back. And of course, such a fast weather change or climate change made it disappear, of course. But the fall, it was like for, I don't know, 800 years. Like, it was not like from one day to the other. Atlantis started to fall as any empire that grew up so much, that created so many options, so many things,
Like
and
Rome.
suddenly
like Rome fell.
Yeah, like
It didn't
Rome.
fall in one day. It took centuries.
it took like
for
400 years. Yeah.
to like completely, parts here would be gone, parts there would be gone, things like that. So that's what actually happened to it. So then, okay. So then if Atlantis fell that way, then what was before Atlantis? Was there was there Lemuria, Mu? What are these?
Yeah.
How far back do we go, Mateus?
We can, as humanity,
Or it's the civilizations, like civilized humanity.
Civilized humanity is maybe around 70,000 years ago.
Okay.
Some other people would say like more than that. But it wouldn't have been like that civilized, like around the globe. So
pockets, yeah.
Yes. Actually, I remember that the beginning of our humanity saying we have to get together and do something different was because of a huge eruption of a volcano that changed the geography of the planet. And that happened around 75,000 years ago. So that situation in the planet changed the weather. It cooled the planet down a lot. It created a tiny glaciation, but it was very fast. So it actually is much more related to that moment that people got together for the first time to say, we have to do something. And that would be like kind of the beginning of the civilizations, let's say.
Got it. And that's where Lemuria and Mu came years later.
Yeah.
Years later. Yeah. So let me ask you, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. As the Antarctic is starting to melt, there are quote unquote rumors of structures being discovered that the melting ice is showing off. That's actually a continent, not just a block of ice. There's a continent underneath Antarctica. Yeah. So what is your knowledge of what was there at what time?
I remember a region in Antarctica called Atombi, and we usually in Atlantis we knew about it. Like there was something there. There was a settlement because Antarctica was like the gate to go beyond. Like all the wisdom of the planet is in Antarctica. All the history of why are we here, it's encoded in Antarctica. So Atlantis actually got there, and they had a settlement there. I don't know much about it. I just know that it was there. I remember making maps about lines of connections from Giza to this point in Antarctica. But I wouldn't say that there are like huge constructions under, but maybe some temples or something
pyramids,
should be there.
Some pyramids or something is there. It's not. You're not going to find like cities and cities and cities. No, but there was something there. But there's something there underneath. So, my friend, I'm going to ask you a few questions. I ask all of my guests. What is your definition of living a fulfilled life?
Definition of a fulfilled life. For myself, it's just being myself and doing what I like, what I want in the moment that I want and that I like. It's just being yourself coherently. What you think, what you feel, and what you do. If those three agree to one another with your own self, that's a fulfilled life. You don't need anything else.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and make sure you share it. Share it with your friends because it makes you think. And the more you think, the smarter you get. I'm Ramo Red Track, the baddest man on YouTube.